thank you to the World Bank team for the invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a bit of a challenge after lunch with half of the room probably in jet lag to make the Warren product interesting, but I'm certainly going to try. Let me first talk a little bit about Paraguay, a country that I'm very passionate about, and that is very much unknown to most of the world. Agriculture is actually hugely important to this country. It's about 35% of the GDP, but in terms of place in the world, it's even more important because there's only 6.5 million people for a country about the size of France or California. So it's basically a giant farm. It's the first largest exporter of renewable energy, having the largest producing dam in the world, even larger than the Three Gorges, the Itaipu Dam. It's the largest exporter of organic sugar in the world, with about 90,000 tons of exports. It's the fourth largest exporter of soybeans, something that not that many people know. It's the sixth largest exporter of corn, the ninth exporter of meat, and within 1 year it will be the sixth. And finally, the 10th largest exporter of wheat. So a country that has depended massively on the growth of its agriculture industry to basically experience tremendous amount of growth over the last 10 years. It's averaged 5% growth GDP. Before I go into the nitty-gritty of the product and our experience with that product, we actually have a little video to show that was done by the IFC when they came to visit us in Paraguay.
Paraguay, a landlocked country of 6 million people in South America, is largely dependent on agriculture. Farmers have difficulty taking out loans and don't have regular incomes. In the summer, the rivers that serve Paraguay's small ports can be too shallow to allow exports. Goods can sit for weeks in a warehouse, leaving farmers at the mercy of Mother Nature before they get paid. IFC is helping farmers get financing more immediately from local banks through the Global Warehouse Finance Program. This innovative program is expected to reach more than 500,000 farmers in developing countries by 2014, including the more than 500 who make up the Pindo Cooperative in Paraguay.
Es un programa, el impacto, vamos a decir, es muy bueno, importante. El sistema de tomar ese crédito sin tener una garantía hipotecaria.
Products like wheat and maize don't go directly to the market after harvest. Instead, they are stored in large warehouses and silos until they can be exported at the best price. A warehouse operator issues a receipt for the stored commodities based on the volume of goods. Under the Warehouse Finance Program, farmers can then use the receipt as collateral for a loan.
Entonces es un producto muy importante llegar con rapidez al socio. Y yo creo que el sector cooperativo de Paraguay tiene un impacto muy grande dentro del propio país.
Sudameris Bank in Paraguay was IFC's first partner for the Global Warehouse Finance Program, which is now being rolled out around the world.
La línea de IFC vino a solucionar realmente un problema no solamente del Sudameris Bank, sino que también del sistema financiero paraguayo, en donde realmente existen déficits de líneas para este tipo de productos.
The program also helps rural entrepreneurs, such as Almiro Peters, who operates a flour mill supplied by about 150 small farmers in the east of Paraguay in Alta Parana province.
Mi papá fue el fundador aquí. El nombre de Santa Rosa fue él que dio. Entonces tenemos una linda historia aquí en Santa Rosa.
Insumagro es una empresa que se dedica a molino, ¿verdad?
El trigo lo compramos de los productores, que la mayoría son pequeños y medianos productores, le compramos. A él le pedimos ayuda al banco, que nos preste plata, ¿verdad? Para comprar ese trigo, pagar a los productores. Nuestra esperanza es crecer, cada año crecer un poco, ¿verdad? Y ojalá que un día seremos grandes industriales que podamos exportar harina para el mundo todo, ¿verdad? Esa es nuestra esperanza, es nuestro deseo, es nuestro sueño.
So that was a little bit of an overview of what Paraguay looks like and some happy clients of the bank. I will start a little bit by giving a brief overview of Sudameris. Sudameris is a commercial bank, commercial and retail bank that we acquired back in 2004 when it was bankrupt with assets of $150 million. To date, we on track to reach $1 billion of assets by the end of this year, equity of about $100 million, and a loan portfolio of about $600 million. It's a tremendous amount of growth that is not specific to us, it's specific to the entire banking sector. Paraguay has enjoyed, like I said earlier, about 5% average yearly growth since 2005, especially during 2010, 2011, and this year where we're expecting 13 to 14% growth thanks to bumper crops. The impact of the agricultural sector on the overall growth of the country is tremendous. This year, the crops are expected to reach 12 million tons of soybeans, and that's up from 4 million just 5 years ago, just to put things into perspective. So the bank has followed the growth of the country, which is obviously a major challenge, as most of you know. Trying to absorb that kind of growth without experiencing an increase in non-performing loans is quite a challenge, while maintaining capital adequacy ratio and provisioning policies. Our efficiency ratio reflects the fact that you have to invest constantly every year. We have to change our IT systems almost every 2 years because they just can't cope with the number of transactions. The return on equity also reflects the fact that it's still a very profitable market, fairly high margin. Half of the economy works in dollars and the other half in guarani. That's also a reflection of the impact of the agriculture product, all of them being sold in dollars. In terms of sector statistics, agriculture represents about 21 to 23% of the last 3 years of the overall banking system. You can see the evolution of the banking system in terms of numbers. It grew 22% in 2011 compared to 2010 and 17% between 11 and 12. These are massive numbers for a small country to absorb, mainly because agriculture and the cattle industry have the ability to have almost 20 million hectares of arable land that's ready to be planted. It's just waiting for financing to be planted. Markets are already there. So the banking sector is trying to catch up with the opportunity. Farmers are increasingly looking at longer-term financing to increase their production, increase the hectareage planted. So the agriculture within the banking system has grown more than 23% per year over the last 4 years. The agriculture within our own portfolio basically reflects more or less the share of agriculture within the entire banking system. It grew dramatically in 2010, 2011, when we decided to be a lot more active, not only in the funding of equipment and infrastructure, but also working capital, warrant product, and so on and so forth. So our portfolio grew 32% in 1 year in 2011. That growth was tremendous. In 2012, we obviously decided to slow down a little bit and basically absorb that growth and try to understand the mechanics of that growth, which explain only 13% growth in 2012. The warrant product has been extremely successful. It's a fairly basic product in Paraguay, a very familiar product. A farmer harvests the crops, the crop goes to one of the 4 warehouse companies that is authorized to issue a warrant. The warrant is transmitted to the bank issues the funding to the farmer. The general process itself, like I said, farmers are starting to get more and more familiar with something that's actually been around for almost 40 years in Paraguay, but was never really used. The clients now understand the benefit of it, and more we see an increase in volumes and number of transactions. The process itself is, like I said, a bit straightforward. Following the harvest, the clients deliver directly the commodity to the warehouse based on the capacity of the warehouse to absorb the product. In a number of occasions, the product do stay in the silos, in the client's grounds, or in the ports. And I'll go back to that point a bit later. The warehouse company then receives the commodity and issues a certificate or warrant, which is immediately endorsed to the bank that will provide the funding to the client. That funding has been pre-approved and negotiated in advance. At that stage, the legal ownership, when the bank receives the warrant, the legal ownership of the goods is formally transferred to the bank. The bank receives the warrant from the warehouse company and disburses the pre-agreed line of credit. At maturity, we unwind the transaction, the bank gets repaid in full capital and interest, and then process the warrant back to the warehouse company, which in turn transfer the legal ownership back to the client. Now, the key criteria of the product in Paraguay are as follows. The products that are financed through this product are wheat, soy, corn, and sesame, including the seeds of those derivatives. The coverage of the collateral is 125% of the line of credit. We have limitations to work with the warehouse in terms of our own exposure of equity to one single warehouse. No more than 40% of our equity can have an exposure to a warehouse company. We monitor the evolution of the collateral price, basically international market pricing. We follow that on a bi-weekly basis, twice a month. The maturity of the product is 180 days renewable once, bringing the overall maturity up to a year. We only work with clients that have at least 5 years experience in their fields. And when the warrant is issued, not only we receive the warrant as collateral, but the product itself has to be insured. There needs to be an insurance on the product itself. Now, the warehouse company, the first warehouse company in Paraguay was actually founded in 1966, and the law that regulates the concept of warrant financing was enacted by Congress in 1970. So it's actually a very old product for Paraguay. Albeit it's almost never been used until the early 2000s. There are basically 4 companies in Paraguay that are authorized by the central bank to act as warehouse for financing purposes. The largest one is a company called Rical, which was the very first company set up, as I said, in 1966, with its own storage capacity of 230,000 metric tons. These are the companies, those 4 companies are responsible for issuing the certificates. In case the guarantee is called legally, the warehouse companies have to deliver the grains. As I said, the minute the warrant is issued, the legal ownership has been de facto transferred to the bank. The legal framework is as follows. Since the warrant financing law enacted in 1970, the warehouse company has to comply with the following requirements to be authorized as such by the Central Bank of Paraguay. You need to have minimal capital of $750,000 equivalent in Guarani. You need to have an annual external audit performed by one of the central bank approved audit firm. You need to allow for the authority to conduct annual inspections. And as I said, it's under the authority of the Superintendency of Bank, which itself depends directly from the Central Bank of Paraguay. And of course, the regulator, as is the case with banks, reserves its own rights to storm in the facilities at any time to make unscheduled visits and audits. Storage costs, in addition to the cost of funds charged by the banks, the warehouse company charged between 20 and 25 basis points of the value of the stored goods as a storage fee. We have to bear in mind that those companies offer additional services. They also offer transportation. Some of them are also offering storage facility in ports. They also install storage capacity on sites in clients' farms for the largest one of them. But roughly, these are the costs, the storage fee that they charge between 20 and 25 bits as a percentage of the value of the stored goods. The storage facility, the commodities that they stored, as I said, wheat, corn, soy, and sesame. Obviously, when Paraguay was producing 3 to 4 million tons of grains per year, storage could be done in those storage facilities. Now, this year, we reached 12 million tons, which basically was way over the limit of the logistics of the country. So what's happening is more and more clients are storing the grains in their own silos after the silos and the storage facilities have been audited by the warehouse companies. The same applies to ports, where we have issues of logistical outputs. 85% of all exports of Paraguay go on the river, and about 3 to 4 months a year, the rivers are too low to allow for the goods to exit at the same time as they arrive in the ports. So ports have invested massively in storage capacity on sites right in front of the boats. And the warehouse companies are auditing those and are using those under also the supervision of the central bank. Like I said, Rical has got a capacity of storage on its own facility of 230,000 metric tons. But this year, almost 90% of the warrants that it issued were for goods that were stored outside of its own facilities. For the banks themselves, the process is fairly straightforward. Obviously, we have a relationship with most of the clients that use this product, not only for this product, but also for asset financing, working capital, development financing. We have that relationship, and the product warrant is only a portion of the funding that is offered to them. So clients are getting more and more familiar with the product. When they come to see us as part of the overall package of lines that we're putting in place, more and more the warrant is one of them. So we approve after a standard credit review process that follows more or less the processes that we've seen earlier this morning. We basically approve a line of credit that will be dedicated to the warrant product. We receive the warrants from the warehouse company, and we issue the funding once we have registered the warrant as a proper collateral with the Superintendency of Banks. The clients, as I said, it's important for us that we only work with clients that have certain size and a certain experience to limit operational risks. And we've put the threshold as 5 years of experience in the field. This is an internal rule. This is not a regulation. The monitoring is fairly important. We obviously monitor the price of the collateral. We do that twice a month. And that may or may not trigger adjustments. Basically, we function between 150 and 125%. When we get to 115% of the value of the funding line, we ask for either additional collateral or early repayment. Within that framework, the banking regulation gives us also some guidelines as to how we can function with a warehouse company. No more than 40% of our equity can be exposed to one single warehouse company. In addition, we have banking lending limits that apply. In the case of hard collateral, 30% of the bank's capital exposed to one economy group maximum. In case of non-hard collateral, just 20%. The evolution of the product within the bank has been pretty tremendous over the last 3 years. The overall number of transactions or operation went from 53 to 122, all that with about 30 to 32 clients. What is interesting is that we're starting to use more and more the product. Clients are using it multiple times during a season. Paraguay has 2.5 crops per year, which explains why you can have multiple operations in 1 year. The average transactions allow for that. It's about 120 days. What's interesting also is the transaction size is decreasing. We're gaining clients that are smaller. It used to be a product that was very much favored by the large cooperatives, the large grain producers. And now we're seeing a trend where medium-sized producers to even certain small producers are looking into it to plug some of their cash flow requirements. All in all, it's been a very successful product. And thanks to the relationship with the IFC, we've been able to multiply the offer through the funding line that the IFC provides to the bank. We've been more or less active in that segment over the last 5 years, which corresponds more or less to 2008 when the agriculture, or rather the commodity prices started to take off, and Paraguay agriculture started to realize that they were sitting on a gold mine. So that 2008 is really a marker in the history of the agriculture sector in Paraguay, where growth has started to take off. We signed the agreement with the IFC in June 2011, and that has allowed us to basically duplicate at that time our offering of funds under that product to our clients. Since inception for us, the total loan value that were disbursed has reached about $200 million, or will reach about $200 million before the end of this year. The loan size range is about $300,000 all the way up to $4 million, which really reflects the diversity of the client base that we have. The $4 million usually, or the multi-million loans usually apply to cooperatives who can be up to 1,500 producers put together. We never experienced a default. I think it's important to highlight this because like I said, it's only a portion of the funding that farmers are using, and because there is a hard collateral, this is the first thing that is always repaid for obvious reasons, so that the farmer can then sell and recover its income. We only had one case where we actually had to trade the warrant. We never took possession of the grain. We actually sold the warrant to another producer. And that triggered zero loss for the bank. In terms of funding or cost to the client, it's about 5 to 6% all-in cost to the client, on which you would have to add the 20 to 25 bips that I was mentioning earlier for storage fees. Average maturity, 120 days, which is, corresponds roughly to the time it takes for some of the commodity prices to recover from the peak selling season. Paraguay's soy period, soy harvesting, is April, between mid-March and end of April. So historically, you always had pretty much every single producer selling their soy at the same time towards the end of, between the end of April and the middle of May, which, as you can imagine, always had an impact on pricing. So thanks to the development of the warrant product, some of those sales have been able to be delayed and therefore allowed for a slight recovery in the prices. Considering the financing cost, it's not always the best source of funding for farmers for working capital. I mean, you're talking about all-in 6 to 6.5% for short-term loan. They probably could get some better pricing, but the benefit of it is extremely fast and it's extremely flexible. And the legal framework has basically no holes into it. In other words, the clients appreciate that within a week they could deliver their grain, or they could have the inspection on their facility and receive a piece of paper that's immediately tradable by the bank without involving public notaries, lawyers, registration of guarantees. So it's a little more expensive than some of the clients would like it to be, but the flexibility basically justifies the cost. Considering the evolution of the economy and the agriculture sector in Paraguay, I mean, it is obvious that 4 warehouse companies is just not enough. Like I said, this year, 90% of all the warrants issued by the largest company, that's about 40% of the whole business, were issued basically off-site. So we expect a lot more companies to go through the approval process with the central bank, so that more facilities can be added. I'll go very briefly through a couple of case studies that we have, a couple of clients, just to put an example on who's using this. And the first example, it's basically a trading company that also finances the small producers that it buys the grains from. In other words, at the planting season period in September, October for the soy planting season, they will finance the farmer with to buy the fertilizers, to buy the seeds, and to buy the pesticides, and will get repaid either in most of the time they get repaid in grain. And what happens is obviously you need to monetize that, so the trader uses the warrant product the minute he receives the grain, stores the grain, monetize the grain through the warrant product with us, and then can immediately finance the farmer for the next crop, which is usually either wheat or corn. So the warrants in that particular case are used for to finance a portion of the trading activity and to cover for the working capital requirement that the trader has towards its own providers, namely finance the next crop. In the next example, what we have is a cooperative which has a slightly different angle in a way that the farmers harvest the crop, give all the grain to the general cooperative, and then needs to be paid immediately so that, again, they can plant the next crop. The cooperative may or may not decide to sell everything in the market. Most of the time, they wait and they keep the product in silo to negotiate the best pricing possible. So in that particular event, the warrant product allows for the cooperative to generate liquidity for its partners or its associates so that they can plant immediately the next crop. And that's pretty much what the warrant product is for us. Thank you very much.